Hello, this is Veno, the dog that answers questions that nobody asked. This will be the type of video that I won't make often, but I wanted to put out something regarding Counter 8 and the general state of Limbus Company. This will also be a continuation of my community posts, since I thought that expressing my thoughts there would be inadequate. Plus, it's nice for me to be able to put out a video in between my actual high effort works, so yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, Canto 8 is good, really good. The themes it raises are deep and thought provoking, while the development that Hanwoo goes through is emotional and meaningful, but still, I can't help but be disappointed with how this chapter of the story turned out, especially in comparison to the absolute peaks that were Canto 6 and 7. It's real weird, right? Usually I would say, wow, they can't possibly top this, and then PM just does it. I highly value the emotions that the story invokes in me at the moment, since it is kind of hard for me to get impressed or emotional. However, Limbus used to do it again and again, just not this time. I'd say that Canto 8 was, for me, closer to something like Canto 4. I didn't like Canto 4 at first, but then, as I understood, with time, the message and the themes it tried to portray, I discovered a newfound appreciation for it. This is somewhat the case with part 2 of Canto 8. The more I thought about it, the more I convinced myself that this is actually the best part 2 of any Canto. It was so good that it's worthy of being the legitimate end of the Canto. Just add a couple more cool fights and the melee song at the end. But alright, let me actually try to explain myself properly and not ramble about random stuff. For starters, I like to outline my biases first. This video is subjective as fuck, so I have to explain where I'm coming from. First, Hanwoo is probably my least favorite sinner. He's not as entertaining as Don Quixote or Heathcliff, he's not as competent and insightful as Faust or Yi Sang, he's not as mysterious and intriguing as Mersal or Ryoshu. He's just a jolly old rich boy, and I don't hate him for that. He's just, comparatively, not as interesting as everyone else. Now, that was my view of him before his Canto, and it is still my view of him today. I hope that this changes when we see his behavior in an intervallo, but right now that's how I feel about him. Second, at this point in time, I'm not exactly happy with the state of Limbus. The way Project Moon makes game design and balancing decisions is unideal, to say the least. I'll explain more later, but just keep my position on this in mind going forward. So yeah, Canto 8. Let's start with its prelude, Nocturnal Sweeping. This is perhaps my favorite interval out of all of them. The story was fun, introduced some of the future major players, gave us more time with Shichun, who's objectively the best side character, fight me, and foreshadowed the problems we'll be dealing with regarding Hanwoo's development and his relationships with the families of Daguanyan. Oh, and the fights were super fun spectacles and had decent difficulty. Always glad to see Ricardo, hope he comes back soon. This interval manages to be both a fun time and a window for things to come, no complaints from me. Now, part 1 is pretty much like any other part 1. It is used for setup, introductions of characters, establishing the family hierarchy selection rules, and slowly showing what the hell is wrong with Hanwoo. We also get some fan service in the form of return general reception guests from Runa, namely Alan and Hanafuda. The last fight though was somewhat disappointing, with the random-ass hobo just killing Hanwoo and dipping. Like, how didn't they know that he can be revived by Dante? I'm pretty sure that it is narratively implied that sinners die quite often during even the filler fights of randoms. The information should have spread after the first fights when the gang was ambushed in the palanquin. Well, it doesn't matter much, part 1s aren't supposed to be mind-blowing anyway. What is much more interesting is how part 2 is executed. It starts with a dungeon and, oh my god, it is actually a dungeon, and not just a straight road packed with filler fights. It's got its own events and fights that can be approached or ignored, which hasn't been done in the main story chapter since Canto 4, which was 2 years ago. Well, anyway, the meat of this part is the candidates and how they were slighted by Hanwoo in one way or another, which was the result of his inaction and status as the family Jade. It was effective in making me dislike the guy, but then another part comes in, which is Hanwoo's childhood flashbacks. in which is uncovered the fate of the Kong family, as well as the wickedness of the actual main antagonist, Jia Qiu. The build-up is immaculate, planting a deceiving sense of comfort, while slowly unraveling the terrible plot that this granny was putting in motion. The payoff is, plainly put, disturbing. Project Moon here have tried recreating the effect that Love Town had on the players, and not to say they necessarily succeeded, but they came pretty damn close. This also makes us sympathetic towards Jia Qiu, who later becomes our most helpful ally, by being the nihilism straight out of Hanwoo's cranium. Yep, that's how debates work in the Project Moon universe. This fight is the highlight of the whole Canto, the turning point for Hanwoo's character, where his shell of silence and indifference is being broken by someone who, at first, appeared as a major antagonistic force, but now turns out to be a harsh teacher, giving one of the people who ruined his life a chance to prove his righteousness and exhume his humanity. Jia Qiu genuinely cares about the people of Hongyan and wants its ruler to be not only just, but a ruler of conviction and principle, one who he wants to set on the path of their choosing.
가보, 너 또한 감히 말해보아라. 홍원에 있어 가장 필요한 것은 무엇인가?
Really powerful stuff. And this is only part 2. I didn't even mention how awesome the fight itself is with the presentation. Unique skill animations underline the intensity of each strike, and the sound design reverberates the feeling of immense power throughout the listener. And his theme is... chef's kiss. I love this fight. I only wish it was a bit more interesting and maybe difficult. It's not exactly riveting gameplay when I have to chip at his HP for 10 turns. Then in phase 2 he's like, Lamao 900 shield for 6 turns, sorry. And after that it's still like you're rubbing his HP bar with sandpaper. It will go down, you'll just be dead tired after that. I was using it poise team by the way, maybe that's just a skill issue on my part. I think I did it before they nerfed some fights in the dungeon, so I hope they fixed some stuff in there. And while I'm on the negativity train, part 2 also didn't really care about the contestants. Many of them got unique designs and fights, but they die pretty much like fodder and only serve to inform the player how everyone hates Hanwoo. I mean, it's better than how certain side characters were used in Canto 7, but not by much. Don't get me wrong, overall this is one of the best, if not the best, part 2 of any Canto. My main gripes come from how part 3 follows up on it. And I got to say something about it. I have somewhat of a hunch here, a theory if you will. But in my humble opinion, Canto 8 was rushed. Some signs point to this, but first let's go through the story here. So, Jia Qiu appears at the banquet, and we're told about the potential War of the Wings, which may include all these insane factions new and old. This sets up the player's expectations for an insane climb toward the temple, where we will be impeded by an enormous tidal wave of factions that are itching to skin us alive. We'll fight tooth and nail, learn about these factions, examine their motives, see their drip, and what do you mean we only get the thumb? And 2 types of enemies we've already seen in the last part. Wow, the thumb, so cool. They're exactly like in Runa, but they don't shoot their guns for some reason. Okay. Then we reach Lei Hang, who is one of the best fights in the game. A genuine challenge that forces you to read his mechanics and formulate a strategy to beat him. The whole fight you need to stave off his offense and prepare for the insane AoE skills that he throws out. And the moment the 6th corner comes, you have to give it your all to finish the fight as quickly as possible until he finishes you off with a 2nd one. A truly formidable opponent that brings the challenging type of fun that came with the likes of Piqua Trio, Ricardo and the like. A truly fantastic boss fight that... And the director caved in. Again. Layhan is now a joke. Great, super, moving on. Next, we get our first fight against the main antagonist of the whole game, Herman's group. They are dripped out in high level ego gear and are ready to take away everything we've worked towards. Finally, our triumphant battle against our rivals. We will need to put our everything into this, consider that their battle debut should be pretty difficult. They have a raw ego after all. This battle is sure to be Oh, what the fuck is this? So you're just a bunch of pushovers. Wow, PM. What a way to make the main antagonist not threatening. They were already being left out of the room in part 2. What is this? Invincibility shields? Fucking invincibility shields. We can't even have the satisfaction of caving their teeth in. Come on, PM, you could have thought of something better, I'm sure. How about they get a second phase where they fully corrode and transform into half humans, half abnormalities? I'm not sure if their version of extractable egos can even do that, but it would still be really cool. Or how about they actually pose a threat even when half HP? A cutscene activates, and Yi Sang with Honglu summon their power of friendship or whatever and whoop their asses, after which they properly retreat or are set aside because the Fun Gang has to deal with the Elders first. It's honestly real lame how Kubo and Jihuan just say nuh-uh and get saved like that. I don't know, maybe I'm too salty about this. Let's just move on. Next, the final battle. The penultimate challenge, where Honglu crosses weapons with the person who ruined his childhood and made him into a passive observer, content with human suffering all around him. His family, his grandma. And the fight is okay. The melee song is emotional, sure, and the fight has cinematic moments. The ending is insanely beautiful and makes a person cry with its cinematography. But I didn't really care. I understand the themes. I find it beautiful how life is worth living, even if it ends and even if ultimately nothing matters. I get that. But there's something missing. Something that every recent Canto had before. I think. I think I don't care about the antagonist, Jia. She's a manipulating, cunning monster that fabricated a clever plan to eradicate the whole family while exploiting the rules the head enforces. She ruined Hanwu's childhood, turned him into a husk of what he could become. She's a genuinely evil person that the player should hate, but at the same time, she's a part of the geriatric chat group who watch Hanwu's stream just to amuse themselves. And the slaughter was just for their amusement, nothing more. This is very impersonal and not something that any of the previous antagonists had done, and probably for a good reason. Jamu doesn't feel compelling, because her actions no longer feel like they came from a character, but from a puppet controlled by the amendment, this bang from SpongeBob, and the collective of elders that we had never seen and don't really care about. Just some guys you have no remorse killing. And thematically, the messaging here is very strong. The elders representing old order, tradition, and hierarchy, which must be upheld by the younger generations, whether they like it or not. No change can be made in such a system, and the representatives of such an order already have everything they could dream of, so they lead dull and pitiful lives filled with vain self-indulgence, a pinnacle of gluttony. And it's cool and all, but I just don't care. While playing Counter 8, I couldn't help but be reminded of Yi Sang and his journey. He was also a man who resigned himself to his fate after all the terrible things that had happened to him. He was convinced that he couldn't be a person of worth and that he should leave the decisions to another party that knows better. During Canto 4, he starts to break out of this mindset and speaks his mind on all of the terrible things K-Corp is doing, and actually interacts with Dongrang, instead of submitting to Herman's group in N-Corp like he used to. The key difference for me, however, between the two stories is Dongrang. I couldn't understand him at first. He was just another villain that did what he did out of greed and desire for recognition. But as time passed, I began to see him in a new light. He used to be a man who aspired to achieve great things in the League of Nine. Along with his compatriots, his desire to help people was genuine. But after what happened to the League when he betrayed them and T-Corp showed up, He went on to become a branch manager in K Corp, using the mirror technology that he didn't develop. He is still a person with shitty morals, a thief and a traitor, but his choices still weigh heavily on him, making him human. What I'm trying to say is it's not exactly necessary to make a villain sympathetic, but showing us how they became who they are goes a long way. All the other Canto villains got this treatment. We've seen how they became who they are and how their decisions shape their character. I believe somewhere in the story it is mentioned that Jia Qiu went through the hierarchy evaluations with only her wisdom. I would have loved to see her past self, going through the trials of the evaluation and outsmarting her opponents, in the end arriving before the elders and contemplating whether she should accept the worm. But we didn't see that. For me, she turned out to be a generic puppet villain that just happened to be Honwu's grandma, and who needed a bath to be defeated. Maybe I'm looking at this wrong. Maybe having more cinematic moments and character development for a villain would distract me from the messages this counter tried to send me. Maybe I'm just like those elders, looking into Limbus Company through Dante's eyes and clapping when the funny coffin man laughs while I click on him, or when a certain dead vampire proclaims he thought of an ingenious idea. I'm not trying to invalidate other people's feelings towards this Canto. I've heard it was life changing for some of them, but that is how I feel. Nothing more, nothing less. Okay, end of the video. I honestly wanted to make something already while I procrastinate on the Could You Survive the City video. It's coming, I just want to make it the best I can possibly make it. Such opinion pieces won't be a common occurrence, I hope. I don't like talking about Limbus, but I still have a lot to say about it. Maybe in the future I'll milk this hate cow, but for now, I'd like to make something that doesn't make me upset. Hope to see you sometime, maybe this month. Alright, bye bye.